Good morning. It is Wednesday, December the 22nd, and this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. After the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare, the Pledge of Allegiance, and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have Donald Trump, Big Government, Jack Dorsey, No Hypocrisy, Dan Bongino, and Raise Your Children. All that and more when I come back. Thank you. And now the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for December 22nd. I am a God of compassion. The heavens shout for joy and the earth rejoices. The mountains burst into song, for I comfort my people and will have compassion on my afflicted ones. I will comfort my church and look with compassion on all her ruins. I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim my name before you. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. I am a God full of compassion and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in mercy and truth. Isaiah 49:13, 51:3, Exodus 33:19, Psalm 86:15. Prayer declaration. Lord, you have redeemed my life from the pit, and you have crowned me with love and compassion. You long to be gracious to me. You rise to show me compassion. You are a God of justice. I wait for you and will be blessed. Through your mercies we are not consumed, and your compassions fail not. Amen. And that was the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare for Wednesday, December the 22nd. Thank you. Republicans, particularly the talk show hosts, have a tendency to make the mistake of, they always talk about having smaller government. We want to have smaller government, less government, but they spend too much time talking about government issues, what legislation is coming up, etc., and talking with or interviewing government folks. Better would be to spend more time interviewing, say, the CEO of Smith & Wesson for the Second Amendment issues, spending more time with perhaps certain political action committees like the NRA and or lobbying groups. I don't know if they're considered a political action committee, but they're definitely a lobbying organization, such as the National Rifle Association and perhaps the CEO of Coca-Cola. I mean, that would be one of the first ones I would want on if the CEO of Coca-Cola is participating in this CRT nonsense, and get an explanation from him as to what the hell he thinks he's doing with the CRT, and be able to show the people, is this something where maybe Coca-Cola is being pressured from the outside, from the government, for instance, or maybe they've been infiltrated, that they just now have a socialist CEO, and perhaps the majority of the people on the board of directors are socialist as well. So that would be a much better interview, and spending more time with interviews and stories about business and business people would be more consistent, would demonstrate more integrity than complaining about big government and then spending all your time talking about nothing but government. Thank you. I was thinking about the Twitter and good old Jack, what's-his-face, that is now no longer the CEO of Twitter, but is still on the board of directors and is now running Block Incorporated. I don't know if that has to do with blockchain or if that has to do with, I'm not sure exactly what it has to do with. Anyways, the point is that I'd noticed that with a lot of these apps, particularly apps that you're using for let's say gig economy stuff, Uber, Lyft, Grubhub, etc., they're not very well run apps. They're not very well run businesses. And then it dawned on me that, and I looked up good old Jack, and sure enough, Jack, he went to college for 2 years, dropped out, went to another college for a little while, and then dropped out of there. And so apparently he doesn't even have a bachelor's degree. But more importantly, I'm not sure even what he was majoring in. It didn't say. But most of these guys are not business majors. They're not business people. I think it was the same thing was with Elon Musk. He went to school for a little while, dropped out. The same thing with the guy in Facebook. He went to school for a couple of years and then dropped out. And to the best of my knowledge, these were not people that were majoring in business. They have no business education. They have no business experience. What they were is simply tech guys that knew how to do some coding, for instance, or other, actually probably have to be coding because they're the ones usually that that started their Twitter and other applications and whatnot. So they start up these apps, and they are visionaries. They're visionaries. They have a dream or a vision, like with Uber, right? That he wants to reform the taxi industry. That's how Uber got started. But he has no business experience. This is not a guy that understands basic principles of business. So he operates his company more as a kind of a dream or a fantasy rather than as a business. And that's where you end up having a lot of problems with these apps and their attitudes, the attitudes of the CEOs, the people on the board of directors, some of the officers in the company. And if you've read some of the internal emails from, I believe it was Facebook, it's stunning. It's stunning where they're just saying, if somebody doesn't think the way I do, of course I'm going to shun them. Of course I'm not going to give them a platform. Wait a minute. You have to give them a platform from a business perspective. They're going to draw eyeballs. They're going to draw advertisers, and those eyeballs are going to view the advertisements and do business with those advertisers, and that's where you're going to make your business and grow your business. But they don't think that way. They think, again, they're dreamers, they're visionaries, They're good at doing all of that and writing code to go ahead and create a platform for their visions and dreams. And another way of putting it is that they see themselves as reality shapers. That they're not just here as a to do something as crass as business. They're here to shape reality and thereby shape the world. So again, visionaries, but they have no business experience. And that's by the way, that's one of the we always have this in the back of our mind, this fear of being taken over by technology. Robots that take over the world, or computers that take over the world, and not just the products, but the people that create those products. We have fear of them taking over the world. The Jack Dorseys and people like that are going to end up taking over the world, and not to our benefit, but strictly for their own benefit. But everybody and everything has an Achilles heel. And the Achilles heel for people like Jack Dorsey is business. He doesn't understand business. As a matter of fact, I've reading about him in in Wikipedia, and Jack Dorsey is a guy that part of the reason that he was ousted was that he was spending more time with Block than he was doing with Twitter. Also, he was having, he's sort of a Swami kind of a guy. He likes to do meditation, and he's into various Eastern philosophies, if you will, or Eastern cults. And so he goes more that direction. Anyways, so like I said, they're not business people, and because they're not business people, that's their weakness. They don't know. Since they don't know how to run a business, eventually they either have to go away, start learning actually how to be a business person, or go away. Elon Musk, the only reason Elon Musk is around is because he has been subsidized by the federal government for a considerable amount of time. Otherwise, he wouldn't be where he is. But there's all these people that want to talk about what a genius he is, and they quote him regularly. He's quoted on Instagram on a regular basis. And no, I mean, anybody can look like a genius if you got millions and millions of federal dollars backing you up. Thank you. Hypocrisy doesn't exist. The left scares the crap out of the right with the threat of the charge of hypocrisy. People on the right are afraid to make bold ethical statements, bold judgments, because they're afraid that the left is going to point out a contradiction in their behavior, and then through that pointing out that contradiction, show them to be some sort of a hypocrite, unworthy of being listened to. So people on the right have a tendency to try to anticipate that argument and couch their language accordingly. So that makes everything they say very weak. And they don't have to do it. You don't have to be afraid of it, because the response is, if somebody was, let's say they ask me, a typical thing is where they're going to set me up might be something as simple as, do you consider yourself to be a good driver? And I would say, well, yes, I do. And then they might say, well, isn't it true that the other day you went ahead and made some sort of a driving error? Or as a matter of fact, they might say, isn't it true that you've gotten 4 tickets in the past year? And I would say, well, yes. Now, normally what would happen with the average right-wing person at that particular point would say, well, haven't you gotten 4 tickets? Then they start to explain, because they sense what's coming. They sense that they're being painted as a hypocrite. And if they're a hypocrite, why should anybody listen to them? So they're afraid they're going to lose listeners, lose audience, etc. And again, you don't have to bother with that. The first thing that you can do is ask questions, of course. If they suggest, didn't you get 4 tickets? And okay, so what? Well, and what you want them to do is come out and either flat out call you a hypocrite, or or suggest, but that you want them to use the word hypocrite. If they refuse to, then you win. You just simply end the conversation and say, you know what, when you decide you want to make some sense, you decide you have something to say, give me a call back. Or we'll talk later when you decide you want to make some sense and draw some sort of a conclusion, because I don't know what you're talking about now. And so if they do come out and start using the words, and for instance, ask the question, well, doesn't that make you a hypocrite? You simply say no. It just means that from time to time, I exercise less than perfect judgment, or from time to time, I exercise bad judgment. Okay, so what you do is you substitute bad judgment for hypocrisy, and that way you can get out from underneath this issue. You're not going to be afraid to open your mouth and boldly proclaim, hey, I'm a good driver. And what that allows you to do, of course, is criticize other people. You see other people making mistakes and screwing up and doing things that are stupid or dangerous, then you can come out and criticize those people, because you're going to anticipate the hypocrisy response, and you're going to be able to deal with it. So again, you step out your front door with much more confidence in being able to deal with other people, whether it's at work or at church, or even dealing with your relatives. So remember, in review, that it is not hypocrisy that's the issue, because again, nobody exercises perfect judgment, okay, so in which we get it right every single time. If I have situations where I cut people off every once in a while, and I would still say that I'm a good driver. There's no hypocrisy there. It is the fact that I exercise good judgment most of the time, but every once in a while I exercise bad judgment. And because with the cutoff situation, what it is letting somebody in. Do I let them in front of me, or do I let them in back of me? Okay, that's a lot of that is about timing and about how I judge traffic flow, et cetera, et cetera. And not very often, rarely, I'm not a good judge of traffic flow, and I should have let them in front instead of letting them in behind me. So that's the way it is as far as human beings. We're not perfect, but that doesn't mean we're hypocrites. And that's the issue ultimately when I say there is no hypocrisy, that hypocrisy cannot exist, because if the hypocrisy existed, everyone would be a hypocrite, right? Because nobody's perfect. Everybody makes errors in judgment from time to time. And so if every error in judgment was considered hypocrisy, every person on the planet would be a hypocrite. And I think for the right, left, that's their point. Why have standards? Why have criticisms and judgments of other people when no one can, and this is actually part of Marxism, when no one can meet or rise to those standards? And it's not true. It's something we all can and do rise to. We just don't do it perfectly. But nobody's expected to do it perfectly. Yeah, thank you. So I was listening to Dan Bongino. He comes on, what is it, AM 790 in L.A., in the L.A. area. And he comes on, I think, in the daytime. I think they replay it at night, and it's playing. But anyways, he's got a show, 1 or 2 hours on the radio. And he, again, is another right-wing talk radio host. Erzat's conservative, but he's better than most, because there's times when he gets to the point, he understands what true conservatism really is, and how it differentiates from the reactionary traditionalism that passes for conservatism. But he did make a big error, that he was playing a clip, and I guess he has a TV show as well as his radio show. So he is invited AOC, the congressman from I guess it's the Brooklyn, I think that's the area she's from. So anyways, on to the show. And she's a lefty, of course, and she's on and on about climate change. And so she is demagoguing. And she demagogues. And of course, her strategy as a Marxist is to not let him have any airtime, to hog the airtime. So he has to interrupt her in order to get in a word in edgewise. And so he interferes and says, it's statistics, okay? Well, the fact of the matter is we haven't had, because this is about the tornado that occurred the other day in EF5. Well, actually, I don't think it was an EF5. But anyways, the point that she was making is that there's more and more, that everything is getting worse and worse. All the storms are getting worse. The tornadoes are getting bigger. The hurricanes are getting bigger and more frequent. And he cut her off and said that's not true. The statistics shows that we haven't had an EF5 tornado in 7 or 8 years. So it's just not true. Well, she didn't listen to him, of course. And this is what I'm saying. This is a perfect example of what I'm saying about the left. If you want to quote statistics, you quote it with fellow conservatives. Because she didn't listen. She just kept running her mouth and demagoguing. She demagogued, and when he confronted her with reality, she just demagogued some more. She doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down. She wouldn't listen. She wouldn't listen to him. She kept talking and talking and talking. He had to he could barely say anything himself, and that's the whole point with the left. They don't want to hear anything. As far as they're concerned, everything is already settled. Marx said that we're going to have a socialist paradise, and that's it. Anything that contradicts it is something to be swept away. Okay? And if it has to be swept away with violence, so be it. So, this is why I say you don't try to reason with the left. If you want to reason, you want to do a reality check, you do it with fellow conservatives. Have a conservative on your show and then check, touch bases and say, okay, I'm not crazy, right? I mean, the fact is that we haven't had an EF5 tornado in 7 years, right? Okay, that's where the statistics come in. Okay, you can share statistics with other conservatives, but with the left, they don't care. They're not interested in statistics. They do all the things that they do. They lie, they cheat, they steal to create a movement. And we go back to Al Sharpton and Tawana Brawley, where he was basically caught lying on her behalf. She was it turned out a phony a phony rape victim. She created a hoax, and he came and stood by her side. And so when she later confessed or recanted her accusations against New York City police officers, then he was asked about this. He said, this all turns out to be a lie. And he said to the news media, he said, it doesn't matter. That's what he said. It doesn't matter because we're trying to create a movement, or it doesn't matter because we're creating a movement. Saying they don't care about the truth. Truth doesn't matter. Movement, power. Okay, create a movement, get people to sign up and get on your side and be part of this big tidal wave of movement towards, I guess, socialist paradise. So the same thing with Robert Reich, who was he's another hard lefty that was in the Clinton administration. He was the Secretary of Labor, and he was talking about with a news person about his experience. Or it was in a book, I think, that he wrote called "Locked Inside the Cabinet" or something, and so in which he describes speaking in front of a bunch of CEOs, and that he said it was a cigar smoked filled room. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that's just a flat out lie. Okay, because nobody's allowed to smoke indoors anymore. Okay, and they haven't been allowed to smoke indoors for quite a while, even during the Clinton administration, going back into the mid-90s. They're just not allowed to smoke indoors. So, and he was confronted with this. Hey, this is a lie. Then nobody was smoking cigars, and he said the same thing. Doesn't matter. I'm trying to create a movement. So remember that. Again, for review, when you want to do statistics, use statistics with other conservatives as a sanity check, a reality check. But when you're dealing with the left, you have to give as good as you get. So, for instance, with AOC saying, there's these tornadoes are getting worse and all this. She doesn't, again, she asks you or demands that you take her word for it. So that puts you in the position of trying to prove a negative in order to defeat her, and which is impossible and cannot be done. So what you have to do is do whatever you can to force her to prove her point. So when she says, the tornadoes, they're getting worse, and this is getting worse, that's getting worse, you say, prove it. Or you call her a liar. You're a liar. You're an absolute liar. And whatever it is that she claims, you call her a liar. Okay? Even if she says, I have evidence. No, you don't. You're a liar. Liar, liar, liar. And you jam her up and you play the same game. Don't let her speak. Cut her off, cut her off, cut her off. And remember, the left has only one way to go. They can only play things deuces wild. You and I, as conservatives, we can play things either straight or deuces wild. So, and this is important because we can go ahead and demagogue the left. And if that ends up not working, we have something to fall back on, and that's reality. Okay, if our demagoguery isn't working, we can say, it doesn't matter because we still have statistics on our side. The statistics show that you're wrong, that you're full of crap, so shut up. Okay, they can't do that. They can't do that. If we jam them up using their own tools and techniques, there's nowhere for them to go. They cannot revert to knowledge. They cannot revert to reality. They cannot revert to ethics because they don't recognize any of that. Thank you. And it cannot be overemphasized that a lot of people call is that you have, and I've said this before, plenty of power. You may not think you do, may not feel like you do, but you do. You really have plenty of power, at least to start with. You got to start with something. And people call radio stations, talk show hosts, and say, "What do I do? What can I do?" And what they're looking for is very often is a search for power. Where can I get the power to make things change? And you usually have the power right in front of you. It's you, and if you're a parent, you have even more power than the people that are single. And because as a parent, you have the power to influence, to shape reality, if you will, for the next 60, 70, 80 years through your kids. But you have to be a parent. If you're hooked up in this idea that your job is to be their friend and to be neutral and to let them find out for themselves, learn by hitting every pothole in the road kind of thing, no. You're not doing yourself, your kids, or this country any favors. If you want to be patriotic, the most patriotic thing you can do is raise your children to be patriots, to be conservative. That when you see things happening on television, when you hear them on the radio, you get your kids and you talk to them about it. Instead of calling a right-wing talk show host and talking to him and saying, I agree with you, blah, blah, blah. Or, I saw on TV and it's really terrible that old Joe does this, that, or the other thing. You get with your kids. Every time old Joe comes on, get your kids in there. Get your kids in their room and sit them down and say, I want you to see something here. Look at this guy. This guy is the President of the United States, and he's feeble. He should never have been nominated as President of the United States, and he should never have been elected. He is intellectually feeble, and he should not be President of the United States. He should be gone. And then whatever mistakes he's making, point them out to your kids. If he's making errors in judgment, if he's making factual errors, if he's going ahead and being a demagogue instead of using facts and figures to try to persuade people, point that out to these kids. What he's doing is no good because he is not proving his case. He's not bringing evidence and proof to try to convince people. He's trying to bully. He's trying to intimidate. AOC comes on and she wants to do her thing. Get your kids in the room and tell them how evil she is because she is trying to literally destroy this country with the Green New Deal, but that she's another person on the left that demagogues, is not interested in reality, not interested in the facts, etc. And you tell them, don't be like her. She's a bad person. Don't be like her. So you got it. You have so much power there. Influence your kids. Tell them, influence them to do right, to think right, to act right, and you will leave a lasting legacy. If every conservative family in this country would do that, would raise their kids as conservatives. Because as I've said before, we're all born conservative. Many of us stray, but we're born conservative. Conservative, if the essence of conservatism is being realistic and using common sense, we're all born conservative. Okay, so make sure that they remain that way. You have the power to influence their lives and to influence events outside your house for the next 50, 60, 70, 80 years. So people think they don't have enough power. They don't feel, feel powerful. So you always are looking for something else that will give you more power. The problem with that thinking of lack is that you never feel powerful with that attitude. If you're always looking at what you don't have, you're always going to look at yourself as in terms of what you don't have. You're always going to define yourself by what you lack. You have to start defining yourself by what you have. And what you have are children, and those children can be very powerful and influential for the decades to come. Thank you very much. And again, I'm Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, saying adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you to be honest, to be smart, to be beautiful, and to remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.